She stepped into the grand music hall with her gaze lowered, looking like nothing more than an unnoticed worker in her worn uniform. People only acknowledged her presence when they needed someone to ridicule for their amusement. But when they pushed her toward the piano as a cruel joke, what followed stunned the entire audience. By the time her hands lifted from the keys, the woman they had ridiculed became someone unforgettable. Emily Johnson moved silently through the marble columns of the Preston Music Conservatory. The faint squeak of her old sneakers contrasted with the refined Chopin drifting from the practice rooms. At 28, she wore the plain beige uniform of the cleaning staff with quiet pride. Her dark hair was tied back simply, her hands practiced and efficient as she emptied bins and polished wood. For 3 years she had worked here, nearly invisible most days, like the dust she wiped from portraits of long-forgotten composers. Students and teachers rarely looked at her, eyes slipping past her uniform, fixing instead on others they deemed worthy of attention. In the main reception hall, she paused to straighten a tilted portrait of a stern-faced maestro before resuming her duties. Though her hands bore the roughness of chemical cleaners, they moved with a grace unnoticed by anyone around her. "Emily, can you handle the reception area today? The foundation board is arriving," her supervisor, Mr. Collins, called out without glancing up. "Yes, sir," she replied softly, heading toward the grand room. There, sunlight poured in, through tall windows, illuminating the magnificent Steinway piano in the corner. Countless concerts and galas had centered around that very instrument. For just a second, Emily's expression shifted, longing flickering across her face. She saw a reflection of herself from years earlier, a young girl at a similar piano, her future like an open composition waiting to be written. But life had changed course, and choices made out of love, not ambition, had rewritten that symphony. Shaking her head, she reminded herself she had accepted this path. Victoria Parker strode through the hall, her heels striking the marble in sharp rhythm. At 53, she commanded the conservatory with the authority once reserved for her. Concert stages, perfectly styled hair, a tailored navy suit, pearls, all symbols of her precision and power. "These chairs must be exactly 1 inch apart, not this careless spacing," she ordered, barely acknowledging Emily. "Yes, Mrs. Parker," Emily answered, carefully moving the chairs. Nearby, Samantha Reed, the conservatory's star piano instructor, smirked as she observed. Known for her competition-winning students and her merciless standards, she spoke loudly enough for Emily to hear. "Victoria, please remind the staff to use the back halls when guests arrive. Last time, some of them wandered into view during the Chopin competition." Emily's cheeks flushed, but her hands didn't falter. Such small humiliations had become as familiar as polishing glass cases of trophies. Later, polishing the railing on the grand staircase, Emily overheard a student struggling with a difficult piano passage. Peering through a cracked door, she saw a girl, no older than 12, stumbling through the notes. Without thinking, Emily whispered, "Try relaxing your wrist on the arpeggios." The girl turned in surprise, just as Samantha appeared. "Did you just try to instruct my student?" Samantha's icy tone cut sharply. You only what? Thought your janitorial skills qualified you to teach piano?" Samantha laughed coldly. "Please, stick to mops and buckets." The door shut in Emily's face. She lowered her eyes and returned to polishing, her shoulders heavier, yet her fingers unseen traced the air, silently completing the music the girl had been struggling with. When the night of the fundraising gala arrived, the conservatory gleamed. Every corner shined from Emily's work, every chair perfectly aligned. Soon the wealthy patrons would arrive, their money deciding which programs would survive another year. As Emily worked quietly in the reception hall, Samantha burst in, clutching her phone, panic etched on her face. "What do you mean you're in the hospital?" she exclaimed. "The gala starts in an hour. Olivia, you can't—" She froze, listening. Food poisoning? Today of all days? Ending the call, she turned pale. Victoria hurried to her, sighed. "What happened?" "Olivia can't perform," Samantha whispered tightly. "She's in the emergency room." Victoria's hand flew to her pearl necklace. "But she's our centerpiece." The Jefferson Foundation had specifically requested Liszt's Hungarian Rhapsody. "I know that," Samantha snapped, then lowered her voice. "None of my other students can perform that piece without serious preparation." Jason Miller, a young teaching assistant who had always treated Emily with small kindnesses, a polite good morning, a quiet thank you, stepped forward, hesitant but determined. "Mrs. Parker, if I might suggest something," he said. Victoria turned quickly, desperate for answers. "What is it, Jason?" He hesitated again, then spoke carefully. "I've heard someone else play that piece, quite brilliantly, in fact." "Who?" Victoria pressed. "Professor Williams is out of town. Unless you're suggesting one of the graduate students." "No," Jason interrupted softly. His eyes shifted toward Emily, who was dusting a display case nearby, seemingly unaware of their crisis. "I'm suggesting Emily." A heavy silence fell over the group. Samantha was the first to recover, letting out a sharp laugh. "The janitor? You can't be serious." "I've heard her after hours," Jason continued firmly. "When she thought no one was listening, she's remarkable." Victoria and Samantha exchanged incredulous glances before their attention fixed on Emily, who had frozen in place, duster raised midair. "Is this true?" Victoria demanded. "You can play?" Emily slowly lowered the duster, her cheeks burning. "Yes, ma'am." "And you think you could handle Liszt's Hungarian Rhapsody?" Samantha asked, her tone laced with scorn. Emily hesitated, then for the first time in 3 years she met Samantha's gaze directly. "Yes, ma'am, I can." Victoria narrowed her eyes, truly studying Emily for perhaps the first time. "You're telling me you believe you could perform at our fundraising gala?" Emily stood motionless, caught in the center of their scrutiny, as the busy staff rushed past, unaware of the drama unfolding. "Let me get this straight," Samantha interjected, her voice dripping with disdain. "You think you can replace Olivia Sanders? Olivia, who's trained at elite institutions since she was 5 years old?" Emily's answer was calm, steady, and simple. "I know the piece." Just then, Richard Taylor, chairman of the board, approached, his curiosity drawn by the tension in the air. "What's going on here?" Victoria forced a light laugh. "Apparently, our custodian believes she can save tonight's performance." Richard's eyebrows lifted slightly as he studied Emily, his gaze moving from her plain shoes to her faded uniform and finally lingering on her hands. Hands that just minutes earlier had been polishing brass. "Well," he said slowly, a gleam flickering in his eyes. "This is certainly unexpected." Samantha leaned closer to Victoria and Richard, lowering her voice but not enough to stop Emily from hearing. "It might actually work in our favor. We can frame it as part of our community outreach efforts. If she's dreadful, we make a self-deprecating joke about being desperate. If she's decent, we look magnanimous for giving a cleaning staff member the spotlight." Victoria's expression shifted, calculation flickering across her face. "The donors might even find it charming. A little novelty before we explain. Olivia's unfortunate absence." Emily stood silently as they spoke about her as if she were furniture, something to be used, not a person with dignity or dreams. "It's settled," Victoria finally announced, turning back to her. "You'll play tonight. One piece Liszt." "And if I refuse?" Emily asked, surprising even herself with the boldness in her voice. Victoria's smile was thin, her eyes cold. "Then we'll have to reconsider your position here." "Budget? Cuts, you understand?" In that moment, Emily realized the choice before her was about far more than music. It was about dignity, identity, and reclaiming the part of herself she had buried away. She drew in a slow breath. The stage was set. The grand hall glittered with the conservatory's wealthiest patrons, their gowns and tuxedos glowing beneath the chandeliers. Backstage, Emily stood alone, still in her beige uniform, her name tag, Emily J., pinned to her chest like a brand marking her as an outsider. And yet, tonight, she was about to step into the light. Victoria stepped up to the microphone, her polished smile gleaming under the lights. "Ladies and gentlemen," she began smoothly, "we have a slight change to tonight's program. Our scheduled pianist has had an unfortunate emergency." She paused, letting the room stir with curiosity before adding in a theatrical tone. However, in the spirit of our community outreach initiatives, we have a special alternative performance. Murmurs rippled across the audience. One of our maintenance staff has generously volunteered to share how music connects us all, regardless of background or training, Victoria announced, the words carrying the weight of a subtle insult. Emily walked onto the stage, the spotlight glaring against her plain clothes. From the back of the hall, a few chuckles drifted through the air. Near the curtain, Samantha stood with her arms folded, a smirk tugging at her lips like a cat savoring its cornered prey. Emily lowered herself onto the grand Steinway, its polished black surface reflecting the nerves in her eyes. For 15 years she had only played in solitude, in empty rooms or on her grandmother's weathered upright piano. Never like this. Never before an audience waiting for her to stumble. Her hands hovered above the keys, trembling faintly. In the front row, Richard leaned toward his neighbor, muttering with a stage whisper, "Well, at the very least, this will be entertaining." Emily shut her eyes. The hall, the whispers, the judgment, they all dissolved. In her mind, she was once again beside her grandmother, an aging woman with bent, arthritic fingers who had once played with world-class orchestras. Music isn't about who you are to the world, her grandmother had told her. It's about who you are when the world falls away. Emily's fingers descended. The first notes of Liszt's Hungarian Rhapsody No. 2 rang out, not hesitant or clumsy as they expected, but bold, precise, alive. The hall seemed to freeze as her touch commanded the instrument. Each phrase spoke with authority. Her hands raced and flowed, delivering fire in the rapid runs and tenderness in the softer passages. The playful sections sparkled with elegance, while the roaring crescendos shook the marble foundations of the hall. Whispers died. Smirks faltered. 200 people held their breath in reverent silence. An elderly patron dabbed at tears. In the back row, a respected music critic leaned forward, astonished. On stage, Victoria's face drained of color. Samantha's grip on the curtain tightened until her knuckles whitened. And Jason watched with quiet vindication, his faith in Emily finally visible to all. When Emily struck the final thunderous chord, silence lingered for 3 long beats before the hall exploded. Applause crashed through the space, hesitant at first, then swelling into a roaring ovation. Cries of "Bravo!" bounced from the chandeliers as the audience rose to their feet. Moments earlier, they had been prepared to politely endure a janitor's fumbling attempt. Now they shouted their approval, their faces radiant with genuine awe. Emily sat frozen, overwhelmed. When she finally rose and bowed with quiet humility, the ovation grew louder, echoing like thunder. David Thompson, a renowned conductor and guest of honor, pushed forward through the crowd and onto the stage just as Emily tried to retreat. "Wait," he commanded, his voice slicing through the applause. "Young lady, where did you study?" Emily turned, the spotlight unflinching on her faded uniform. "I didn't, sir, not formally." Gasps swept through the audience. David stepped closer, incredulous. "That's impossible. Your technique, your interpretation." "My grandmother taught me," Emily replied softly, her words carrying clearly across the silent hall. Recognition flickered in David's eyes. "Margaret Johnson? The Margaret Johnson who played with the National Symphony in the 70s? Emily nodded gently. "She raised me after my parents died. We couldn't afford conservatory tuition, but she gave me everything she knew." Victoria hurried forward, her polished tone returning as she tried to reframe the moment. "How fascinating. What a wonderful human interest story." "It's not a story," Emily interrupted quietly. "It's my life." The dignity in her voice struck harder than any sharp retort. "I was accepted to Juilliard 15 years ago," she continued, this time fixing her gaze on Samantha. "But the same week my grandmother had a stroke. I stayed to care for her. By the time she passed," her words trailed off, but the truth had already shattered every assumption in the room. The medical bills piled up, and with them Emily's dream slipped away. The opportunity was gone. David Thompson's expression softened as he pieced it together. So you took this job to stay close to the music? Yes. Emily's simple word carried the weight of sacrifice. Dreams set aside but not destroyed. A quiet determination to remain connected to what she loved even when every path forward seemed blocked. In that moment, under the harsh glare of the spotlight, Emily Johnson was no longer just the woman who swept floors and polished railings. She was no longer invisible. To everyone in the hall, she had become undeniably human, complex, resilient, extraordinary. The reception buzzed with a new kind of energy. Patrons who had once ignored her presence now flocked toward her with eager questions and wide-eyed admiration. The uniform that had once made her blend into the background was suddenly irrelevant. Your interpretation of the middle section was breathtaking, gushed a silver-haired woman who had funded the East Wing's construction. So much passion. So much depth. Emily received the praise with calm grace, neither shrinking from it nor basking in it. Across the room, Victoria Parker moved with her usual polished precision. Her professional smile tightened as she fielded questions. Of course, we've always recognized her potential, she insisted to a major donor. Our community outreach programs are designed to uncover hidden talent like this. Meanwhile, Samantha Reed lingered by the refreshment table, isolated. The eager students who once orbited her now gathered around Emily instead, their admiration shining brighter than any resume or diploma could command. Jason slipped quietly to Emily's side, offering her a glass of sparkling water. I told you they'd be amazed, he said softly. Emily accepted it with a small nod. Thank you for speaking up. Not many people would have. Before Jason could respond, David Thompson returned, this time with Elizabeth Chen, the head of the Jefferson Foundation. Miss Johnson, Elizabeth began warmly, our foundation believes talent should never be limited by circumstance. We've been searching for someone to lead a new initiative for underprivileged youth, someone who understands both musical excellence and the obstacles young people face in reaching it. David added, the role would include teaching, mentoring, and performing. Your story, your perseverance could inspire students who feel locked out of opportunity. Emily's eyes widened, realization dawning. This wasn't just recognition, it was purpose. From across the room, Richard Taylor watched silently, his expression unreadable. The balance of power in that hall had shifted forever, like the earth itself had moved beneath their feet. 3 months later, Emily walked the same conservatory hall she had once cleaned. But her hands now carried sheet music instead of cleaning rags. Her transformation hadn't been sudden or magical. This wasn't a fairy tale where a custodian becomes royalty overnight. It was slower, steadier, more meaningful. Her clothes remained simple, but they no longer marked her as invisible. As the new director of the Jefferson Foundation's Music Within Reach program, Emily now worked with students from families like her own, talented kids whose dreams had been dismissed because their parents couldn't afford expensive lessons or elite institutions. Passing the reception desk, Emily exchanged a nod with Victoria. The gesture was stiff but civil. Their relationship had settled into a kind of mutual respect. Uneasy, perhaps, but real. Some lessons, after all, are learned slowly, if they're learned at all. Inside the practice room, 18 teenagers waited for her. Some looked hopeful, others skeptical. They came from neighborhoods where music programs had been cut, where even a basic piano was out of reach. Emily sat at the instrument, her students watching closely. My grandmother always told me, she began gently, music isn't about who you are to the world. It's about who you are when the world falls away. Her hands touched the keys. She played, not to prove anything, not for applause, but because music had always been her truth. The students leaned in, their eyes widening as they glimpsed, maybe for the first time, what could be possible for them too. Emily understood finally that the bravest act of all is simply to exist as yourself, without apology, in a world that prefers you invisible. Her story was proof that true talent doesn't always wear credentials or polished resumes. Sometimes it hides in unexpected places, in calloused hands that work quietly, in lives shaped by sacrifice, in hearts that have learned resilience. How many Emilys move among us unseen? How many gifts remain buried because of appearances and assumptions? Have you ever been underestimated? Or witnessed someone reveal a hidden brilliance that changed the way you saw them? Share your experience in the comments below. You never know who your story might encourage. And if Emily's journey moved you, don't forget to like this video and subscribe. We're so close to 1,000 subscribers, and every new supporter helps us bring more stories of resilience and triumph into the light. Remember, sometimes the most beautiful music comes from the most unexpected places. Until next time, keep looking beyond the surface.